Right before my wedding day, I went to visit my future mother-in-law at her house. As I was leaving, I realized I forgot my coat. I walked back inside to grab it and instantly decided to call off the wedding right on the spot. My name is Nia, and at 32 years old, I had spent the last decade building a life completely separate from my family's expectations. Outwardly, I was the director of a small nonprofit providing financial counseling to women. In reality, I was the silent CEO of Vanguard Holdings, a quiet empire quietly acquiring prime real estate and distressed debt. But nobody knew that, certainly not my fiancé Marcus or his mother Vivian. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you have ever had your family underestimate you, or if you have had to set hard boundaries with toxic relatives, hit that like and subscribe button. This journey is not for the faint of heart. The incident that shattered everything happened just 3 days before my $150,000 wedding. A wedding my family and Marcus had pressured me into financing through what they believed were high-interest loans. I had driven out to Vivian's house in Alpharetta. It was one of those massive, imposing homes that looked beautiful on the outside but always felt cold the moment you stepped through the door. I was there to drop off the final batch of wedding invitations. Vivian had greeted me with her usual brittle smile, offering a cup of tea while making pointed comments about my modest car and my simple clothes. I had smiled and nodded, playing the role of the meek, socially awkward nonprofit worker she expected me to be. After a strained hour, I finally excused myself, claiming I needed to prepare for the rehearsal dinner the next day. I walked out to my car, started the engine, and realized my favorite cashmere coat was missing. It was a chilly November afternoon, so I quickly headed back to the house. The front door was slightly ajar. I must not have pulled it shut properly when I left. I stepped into the foyer, the heavy wood floors dampening the sound of my footsteps. I was halfway to the living room when I heard their voices coming from the kitchen. "You have to make sure she signs that prenuptial agreement tomorrow." Vivian's voice was sharp, stripped of the syrupy sweetness she used around me. Her little charity might be practically bankrupt, but that trust fund her grandmother left her is not. I froze, my hand hovering over the back of the sofa where my coat was draped. The trust fund. My grandmother had left me a substantial trust, one I had carefully protected and grown into Vanguard Holdings. I had mentioned it to Marcus early in our relationship, downplaying its size, but clearly he had shared that information with his mother. "Once you are married, Marcus, you use that trust to clear Chloe's debts." Vivian continued, her voice echoing slightly in the large kitchen. "Brad is in deep with those crypto loans, real deep. We have to save Chloe. She is the one who actually belongs in our circle. She is the perfect daughter-in-law for a family like ours, not this plain, boring girl. Chloe, my younger sister, the golden child of the Washington family. The social media influencer who never missed a chance to put me down. And Brad, her white, arrogant husband, who constantly bragged about his crypto investments. They were drowning in debt, and Vivian wanted to use my money to save them, because Chloe was the perfect daughter-in-law. A sick feeling washed over me, a familiar tightening in my chest. It was the same feeling I had when my parents forced me to give up my college scholarship so they could pay for Chloe's pageant coaching. I heard Marcus laugh. It was a cold, calculating sound that made my blood run cold. "Do not worry, Mom. She is desperate for this wedding. She is so grateful I even looked at her. After we say I do, I will convince her to leverage the trust for an investment. I will spin some story about our future. Chloe and Brad will be fine. Chloe will not embarrass her new family." My breath hitched. The man I was supposed to marry in 3 days. The man who had held me and told me he loved my passion for helping others. He was planning to steal my inheritance to pay off my sister's husband's gambling debts. He thought I was desperate. He thought I was blind. I didn't storm into the kitchen. I didn't scream or cry. I felt a sudden, absolute clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when the final illusion shatters. I reached out silently, picked up my coat from the sofa, and carefully, quietly backed out of the house. I pulled the front door shut, making sure it clicked perfectly into place. I walked to my car, my steps measured and calm. Once inside, I locked the doors and pulled out my phone. I didn't call Marcus. I opened our text thread and typed a simple message. "Just got home. See you at the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. I hit send, my thumb hovering over the screen for a moment before I closed the app. Then I opened my contacts and found the name I needed, Tasha Davis. She was more than just my lawyer. She was the architect of Vanguard Holdings' legal structure, a woman whose sharpness matched my own. The phone rang twice before she answered. Nia. Everything okay? Tasha's voice was brisk and efficient. I took a deep breath, the cold air from the car vent bracing against my face. Tasha, I need you to initiate Plan B immediately. Plan B. Tasha paused, the professional tone shifting into high gear. You are sure? I am absolutely sure. I watched Vivian's house in the rearview mirror as I pulled out of the driveway. I need Vanguard Holdings to acquire all outstanding debt belonging to Brad and Marcus. Every loan, every credit line, every marker they have out there. I want it all. Consider it done, Tasha replied, her voice tightening with a mixture of concern and readiness. How much time do we have? The wedding is in 3 days. I want the paperwork ready by the ceremony. I want to own them completely. I hung up the phone and merged onto the highway. The tears I expected didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. They thought I was a naive charity worker they could easily manipulate. They thought my grandmother's trust was a piggy bank for their golden child. They were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. The wedding was still happening, but the vows were going to be very, very different. The rehearsal dinner at a high-end Buckhead restaurant was exactly the kind of ostentatious display Vivian loved. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over arrangements of white orchids, and the air hummed with the quiet, practiced conversations of Atlanta's black elite. I sat at the head table, the supposed guest of honor, feeling completely detached from the spectacle unfolding around me. My mother, Clarice, sat to my right, her voice carrying over the gentle clinking of silverware. She had not stopped singing Marcus's praises since the first course arrived. We are just so blessed, Clarice announced to a table of Marcus's extended relatives. Marcus is doing so well at the firm. It is a relief really knowing Nia will finally have someone to take care of her. Her words were laced with the familiar condescension I had endured my entire life. Oh, Nia does her best, my mother continued, waving her hand dismissively. But you know how nonprofit work is. Very noble, but it hardly pays the bills. We always worried she would end up struggling, not like Chloe. Chloe, seated across the table, flashed a picture-perfect smile, adjusting a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light. Beside her sat Brad, her husband. He leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon, looking incredibly pleased with himself. Hey, if the charity thing goes under Nia, you can always come work for me. Brad offered, his tone dripping with arrogance. My crypto platform is expanding. I need someone to manage the social media accounts. You know, post some memes, keep the engagement up. It pays better than whatever you are doing now. The table erupted in polite laughter. My mother beamed at Brad, clearly viewing his insulting offer as a gesture of familial support. Marcus chuckled, placing a hand over mine, feigning affection, while implicitly agreeing with the mockery. I smiled back, a calm, measured expression. I thought about the conversation I had overheard just 24 hours earlier. I thought about the $5 million Brad had lost, the debt that was currently suffocating him. I thought about Marcus's plan to use my inheritance to bail him out. The irony was almost too delicious to bear. That is very generous of you, Brad, I said smoothly, but I think I will stick to what I know. Vivian, seated on Marcus's other side, cleared her throat. The noise at the table immediately died down. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick manila folder, sliding it deliberately across the pristine white tablecloth until it rested directly in front of me. Nia, darling. Vivian began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I know this is a bit unconventional for a rehearsal dinner, but Marcus's lawyers insisted we get this out of the way before the ceremony. Just a formality, really. I looked down at the folder. The words prenuptial agreement were printed boldly across the top page. The room went silent. The timing was entirely intentional. A public setting surrounded by their wealthy friends and my approval-seeking parents designed to pressure me into signing without question. My father, Pastor Thomas, leaned forward, his expression stern. It is for the best, Nia. Marcus has a substantial career to protect. In our circles, this is standard procedure. You understand. It was the same dynamic they had always used. presenting their demands as absolute necessities, framing my compliance as the only acceptable choice. 5 years ago, they had used the exact same tone when they told me to decline a full academic scholarship. Chloe needs a better launch pad, my mother had argued then. You are smart, Nia, you can figure it out. But Chloe needs the right connections to find a husband of her caliber. We need the tuition money to hire a pageant coach for her. I had swallowed my pride and taken out student loans, working 3 jobs to pay my way through college while Chloe paraded across stages in gowns paid for by my sacrifice. They had always treated me like an expendable resource, a stepping stone for the golden child. Now Vivian was trying the same tactic, using public pressure to secure her son's financial dominance. It just protects the assets Marcus has worked so hard to build. Vivian added, her eyes narrowing slightly, daring me to challenge her in front of the guests. We do not want any misunderstandings later. I didn't argue. I didn't ask to read the terms. I simply reached into my purse, retrieved a sleek silver pen, and flipped to the signature page. The swift motion sent a ripple of surprise around the table. Of course, Vivian, I said, my voice completely serene. I believe in protecting what we have built. I signed my name with a flourish, the ink gliding smoothly across the paper. I handed the folder back to her. Vivian snatched it up, a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. My mother nodded approvingly while Chloe exchanged a knowing look with Brad. They thought they had won. They thought they had secured Marcus's wealth and boxed me out. They had absolutely no idea that by forcing me to sign that document, they had legally severed any claim Marcus would ever have to Vanguard Holdings. They had just protected my billion-dollar empire from his $3 million debt. Brad stood up, raising his bourbon glass, signaling for a toast. To Marcus and Naya, he declared loudly. And to family taking care of family. As the glasses clinked, I leaned slightly toward Brad, keeping my voice low so only he could hear. Speaking of taking care of family, Brad, I whispered. I hear the crypto market is brutal right now. FTX took a pretty hard hit last quarter. I certainly hope you haven't been leveraging any church assets to cover those margin calls. Brad froze his glass, hovering inches from his mouth. The color drained from his face so fast he looked ill. His eyes darted to my father, then back to me, sheer panic replacing his previous arrogance. I picked up my water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. I did not wait for his response. The real show was scheduled for tomorrow. The morning of the wedding arrived with a frantic, superficial energy that felt perfectly on brand for my family. The bridal suite at the country club was an explosion of white tulle champagne flutes and nervous chatter. The air was thick with hairspray and the scent of expensive lilies. I sat calmly in front of the vanity mirror, watching the makeup artist apply a final layer of setting powder. I looked at the reflection, noting the stark contrast in the room. My wedding dress hung neatly in the corner. It was elegant, understated, and completely overshadowed by the monstrosity hanging next to it. Chloe breezed into the room, bringing a gust of chaotic energy with her. She was already wearing her bridesmaid dress. To call it a bridesmaid dress was an insult to the concept of subtlety. It was a sequined, plunging, champagne-colored gown that looked more appropriate for a red carpet gala than a wedding where she was not the bride. She twirled in front of the full-length mirror, admiring her reflection with undisguised vanity. You know, Nia, I was actually surprised when Marcus proposed to you, Chloe said, her voice carrying that familiar syrupy condescension. I mean, with your little non-profit job and all, I figured you would end up marrying some boring accountant. But Marcus, he is a catch. He is doing so well. I dismissed the makeup artist with a polite thank you and turned in my chair to face my sister. She was still admiring her reflection, running a hand over the tight bodice of her dress. He is definitely something, I agreed, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Chloe laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound. He told Brad last night that he feels sorry for you sometimes. You know how hard you work for those poor women at your charity. He said you needed someone to finally take care of you. She walked over to my vanity and picked up a tube of lipstick, examining the color critically before tossing it back down. Oh, and he mentioned the house, she added casually, as if delivering the weather report. Marcus said that since you two will be moving into his place, it makes sense to transfer the deed of Grandma's house to Brad and me. Just to avoid any complicated tax issues down the line, of course. The audacity was breathtaking. They were planning to steal my grandmother's house, the only piece of property left in my name that wasn't tied to Vanguard Holdings, and frame it as a favor. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. Transfer the deed. I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. To avoid tax issues. Exactly? Chloe beamed, finally looking away from the mirror to look at me. It is just practical, Nia. Brad needs a clean asset on paper for his next crypto venture. And honestly, it is the least you can do. You barely use the place anyway. The entitlement radiating from her was suffocating. It transported me back 5 years to a cramped hospital room. I had been recovering from a severe car accident, my leg shattered. The insurance payout was substantial, meant to cover my extensive physical therapy. My parents had walked into that hospital room, not with flowers or comfort, but with a demand. They had insisted I sign over half the settlement to Chloe. She needed the money for pageant coaching and a breast augmentation to secure her spot in the Miss Georgia competition. When I refused, they had called me selfish. They said I was ruining her future because I was bitter about my own injuries. I looked at Chloe now, standing in her ridiculous dress paid for by the very pageant success built on my suffering. Just like it was practical for me to fund your pageant dreams with my settlement money, I said softly. Chloe's smile vanished. Her eyes hardened, revealing the viciousness she usually kept hidden behind her influencer persona. Oh, get over it, Nia. That was 5 years ago. And look where it got me. I married Brad. He is a successful investor. We are building a life you could only dream of. You should be grateful I even agreed to be in this wedding. I only did it because Marcus asked me to. He knows I deserve to be surrounded by people who actually understand our lifestyle. You are lucky he is willing to elevate you. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I slowly picked up my diamond earrings from the vanity table and began fastening them. You are right, Chloe, I said, my voice steady and clear. You do deserve to be surrounded by people who understand your lifestyle. I reached into the small silk clutch resting on the table. My fingers closed around the cold, smooth metal of a silver USB drive. I stood up, smoothing the front of my silk robe, and walked over to her. I took her perfectly manicured hand and pressed the drive into her palm. What is this? Chloe asked, looking down at the drive with a mixture of confusion and disgust. Consider it an early wedding gift from me to you, I said, maintaining eye contact. It is a recording from Marcus's office yesterday afternoon. Your successful investor husband Brad was crying, actually sobbing. He was begging Marcus for a $2 million bridge loan because his crypto exchange is a complete fraud, and the people he owes money to are threatening to break his legs. Chloe stared at me, the color draining from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I suggest you find a laptop and listen to it before you walk down that aisle, I added softly. Just so you know exactly how rich your husband really is. I turned back to the mirror, adjusting a stray curl. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Chloe's ragged breathing. She clutched the USB drive so tightly her knuckles turned white, her perfect facade cracking into 1,000 pieces. My mother rushed into the bridal suite first, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. Clarice Washington was a woman who lived for appearances, her perfectly coiffed hair and tailored suit, a testament to decades spent playing the devoted pastor's wife. My father, Pastor Thomas, followed close behind. He was an imposing man, tall and broad-shouldered, accustomed to commanding a room with a single look. They found Chloe crumpled on the velvet settee, sobbing hysterically. The USB drive clutched against her chest like a lifeline. She played the victim with Oscar-worthy precision, gasping for air and pointing a trembling finger at me. She is ruining everything, Chloe wailed, her voice thick with manufactured grief. She is trying to destroy my marriage. My father did not ask what happened. He did not ask what was on the drive. He did not ask his eldest daughter, standing quietly in her silk robe 2 hours before her wedding, if she was okay. He simply reacted to the disruption of his carefully curated family image. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. The air shifted as he loomed over me, his face dark with fury. He raised his hand, the heavy gold ring he wore catching the light, and for a split second I thought he was going to strike me. He stopped short, but the threat hung heavy in the air, a physical manifestation of the control he had always exerted.